Good afternoon and welcome to the KISS TV election news. We have just been seeing an update by the IEBC. They've talked about the KIMS kits failures. They've explained that 200 failures have been witnessed across the country out of over 46,000. They've also clarified that in El Das, where there's a situation where the militia have taken over, they're working with security officers. And also they've clarified that 30% of people have voted so far out of 22 million registered voters. And of course, in the headlines, we have Roots presidential candidate, George Ojakoya, hasn't cast his vote yet. We have 3 presidential candidates who have cast their votes. And of course, it's all systems go at the National Tallying Center at the Bomas of Kenya. A very warm welcome to you. Roots Party presidential candidate George Ojakoya failed to cast his vote after the KIMS kit failed to identify him. Ojakoya arrived at Indangakalasia Primary School in Matungu constituency at 10:10 a.m. in a 2-vehicle convoy, but could not vote due to a technical error. He engaged briefly with the presiding officer before walking out. He's the only presidential candidate who's yet to cast his ballot. Failure of the KIMS kits was reported in several other polling stations in Matungu constituency. Voting was delayed for over 4 hours in Namulungu, Mirere, Namanga and Khalaba polling centers over failure of the KIMS kits. Elsewhere, 3 out of 4 presidential candidates in this year's election have already cast their votes at their respective polling centers. The first to vote at 6 a.m. was UDA's William Ruto, who voted at Kosachai Primary School in Taribo constituency. The second to vote was Agano Party presidential candidate David Maure at Upper Hill Primary, followed by Azimio candidate Raila Odinga, who cast his vote at around 10:30 a.m. at Kibera Primary School. The Azimio presidential candidate Raila Odinga arrived at Old Kibera polling station to a triumphant welcome. Violent protests today rocked Bogiakumu in Bonchari after a lone gunman shot and injured a man followed a political disagreement. Residents said an altercation of a political allegiance to some candidates sparked the shooting at the Bosiabano outside Suneka town at night. There were scanty details in the identity of the shooter, though some residents said he's a member of a local vigilante. The victim suffered injuries to the abdomen. Gesonso Sub-County Commander Charles Machinji said they've already arrested the primary suspect. Voters who had braved the chilly morning at Bandege polling station in Ugenya scampered for safety after gunshots rent the air shortly after the station opened for voting. According to eyewitnesses, security personnel manning the polling station were forced to shoot in the air to save the area assistant chief from agents of a parliamentary aspirant who demanded the administrator leaves the venue. The assistant chief of Kathieno B sublocation in East Ugenya ward, Joash Ogola, was the first in the queue and had just cast his vote when the incident happened. Low voter turnout has been witnessed at Mutomo polling station in Gatundu South. This is where President Uhuru Kenyatta and former First Lady Mama Ngina Kenyatta cast their votes. Gatundu South MP candidate Peter Kibadi said bad weather conditions might have contributed to low numbers. He said Kenyans should come out and vote for leaders who will transform their lives. Now, earlier we spoke to our political analyst, Mr. Felix Olek. Here's what he had to say about the votes.
I think IBC had a major false start yesterday. The cancellation of the gubernatorial contest in Mombasa and Kakamega was huge. I think the net effect is that IBC has disfranchised voters in a major way in those 2 areas. Remember, IBC also cancelled constituency elections in Kacheliba, in West Pokot, and today morning in Rongai. IBC should do better. They have the resources. We only hope that that kind of mishap is not replicated at the presidential level, because that way this country will be teetering on the brink. Generally this morning, the voting process started very well. The KIEMS kits have been working fairly well, but we hope that the mistakes that IBC realized yesterday and today morning are not replicated in the main race, which is the presidential contest. In terms of voter turnout, the Electoral Commission is yet to tell us the actual figures, which they should be telling us shortly, but a general overview from the voting process, the voter turnout seems not to be very impressive. The long queues, especially in the city, that have been experienced in the previous elections are not there. If you look at areas like central Kenya, the enthusiasm seems not to be there. Although in the traditional bases of the main presidential contenders, especially in Nyanza and parts of the Rift Valley, the voter turnout seems to be high. We expect the results to start streaming in from around 5 p.m. when the polling stations officially close the voting process. Remember, all polling stations have a maximum of 700 voters. So polling stations that have fewer voters will send in their results first, because results at the polling stations are final. So the IBC bosses at that level will be sending in their results directly to the National Tallying Center. Another set of results, or rather the two sets of results, are sent simultaneously to the National Tallying Center and to the Constituency Tallying Center.
Thank you very much, Felix. And finally, it is all systems go at the National Tallying Center housed at the Bomas of Kenya, as officials wait for results that are expected to start streaming in after polls close at 5 p.m. Workers and technicians were seen putting last-minute touches to ensure smooth operations of what would be the nerve center of the general election. Security is tight at the premises, with a contingent of police from the APs and GSUs standing guard and patrolling the area. Nairobi security chiefs and area police commanders were also spotted inspecting the premises. At the tallying center, there are allocated spaces for diplomats, election observers, presidential candidates, political parties, observers and stakeholders, as well as IBC staff. Indeed, thank you for joining us for this bulletin. More updates are coming through the day. Keep it KISS TV. I'm Susan Kimachia.